Weaver, and welcome to Point. Today on the program, I'm joined by
Tu
the
t'endormes
award-winning
beaucoup?
investigative journalist for 60 Minutes, a position he held for 25 years, Barry M. Lando. He's written a terrific book called Web of Deceit, The History of Western Complicity in Iraq. It's interesting because it takes us right back to the very beginning of Iraq, a country that was only recently formed last century, and one in which Churchill himself had a lot of thoughts on. It's an interesting book and an interesting and important history to know about when looking at the world today and how things are
T'as un relais d'énergie?
in Iraq. So please stay with me for my interview with Barry Lando.
Ça marche, mes yeux fermés, Zachary. Hein? Oh, bonjour.
Well, Barry, I'm delighted to have the chance to talk with you. Web of Deceit is a book that really, again, reminds me why it's so important to take the time to read a book, because I think there were parts of which you explained to the reader in your book about the history of Iraq that I knew. There were different books that I had read that sort of touched on it here and there. But what I really liked about your book is you take us through from the beginning up to the current state of things in Iraq. Now, what was interesting to me is I did a quick survey of friends. People know that Iraq is sort of a new formation, but not many people can actually tell you how new it is. Is that something that, as a journalist, sort of amazed you as you watched everything unfold in this latest chapter of Iraq's history?
Well, what amazed me, one of the things that amazed me was the similarities between what is going on, what has gone on in the last couple of years in the invasion of Iraq, current invasion, and what happened after the British formed Iraq almost 80 years ago. They formed it after World War I. They put three peoples together, the Kurds, the Shiites, and the Sunnis, as part of the old Turkish Empire, which was collapsing. Though they were warned at the time that this was a recipe for disaster, it wasn't going to work. But they wanted the petroleum that the Kurds had, which is why they included them in this mix.
Which was interesting because, as you pointed out in the book, the Kurds were added after. So they were sort of added into the Iraq mix at the end, even though they knew that this was not what the Kurds were
Right,
doing.
and as a matter of fact, the Kurds had been promised autonomy during World War I by
Pas bon, les
the
zucchini.
Allies. But afterwards, when they understood that the Kurds had a lot of petroleum, all of a sudden these promises of autonomy vanished, and the Kurds got put into Iraq. So what the British wanted then was petroleum, and they also wanted bases in the new country, bases to protect their empire, India and Persia, Iran,
Yes.
which is what they had, which is very similar to what the United States wants, I think, in Iraq today. They want petroleum, and they're building huge military bases there.
Well, I thought it was interesting because one of the points that you made at the beginning of the book was that not only were there all of these similarities, but that a lot of what has happened and a lot of what the Allies have either directly been involved in, as we call the Allies now, or have a history of involvement supporting such things as the idea of chemical weapons being used. That there were so many ironies that what you open the book by telling us is that there were a lot of powerful people around the world who were very concerned when Saddam Hussein was taken alive.
Right. Well, I think they were concerned because if there had been a true trial of Saddam Hussein, or there was a trial that was not controlled by one power, as this one was, but with international participation and open to various charges, that Saddam could have implicated a number of leaders, world leaders, past and present, in his crimes. He could have, or the prosecution could have, if they wanted to. But it turned out to be a totally different trial. It's been basically controlled by the United States. They're the ones who set up the tribunal, they finance it, they've trained the judges, the prosecutors, the lawyers. They're even gathering the evidence. The FBI people assigned to Baghdad are among those out gathering evidence for the tribunal. But there's a statute of the tribunal as well that says that only Iraqi citizens and Iraqi residents can be charged. So that
Yes.
basically let everyone else off the hook.
And I thought it was an interesting spin too, because when I read a book like this and you sort of learn the history, or you learn sort of new angles to what you have seen played in the headlines, I sort of dial up the headlines in my mind and replay things. And one of the things I thought was interesting when I thought back over the time where they talked that there will be a trial and where will this trial take place, I remember that conversation taking place in media. And I remember the spin as to why the Americans insisted that it should be happening in Iraq, because they said this was important to the democracy, this was important to the future of Iraq, that
Zachary?
it was tried in Iraq by Iraqis,
Zachary?
and that the judgment was rendered by Iraqis.
Est-ce que
Of
tu vas aller
course,
faire dodo, mon
of course,
amour?
reading the book, we realized there was also a whole
Tu
other
t'es allé
dimension
faire
that they didn't
dodo?
want people to realize, which is by trying in Iraq, as you said, it eliminates other people
Zachary?
brought into the discussion in court.
Well, they even could have had the trial in.
Mais tu fais-tu dodo, mon amour?
Invited international jurors to take part, or set it up under guidelines, different guidelines, but they chose not to do that. But what also surprises me is that the Western